Hey guys, welcome back. So we got to get back into Marauders because I want to pose a couple of questions and share a few ideas as well. Because one, with us seeing the way that Sebastian Shaw handled the resurrection with his son, and when doing so clearly making some type of arrangement with Charles Xavier, but on top of that with Xavier, who manages every mutant's memory, which may have given Xavier insight into some of Sinister's secrets to where he may have had Sebastian Shaw take care of one early on. So let's get into it. But first, if you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe to catch the spills every week, and don't forget to hit that bell up top so we can squad up in the comments for the first hour. Alright, so jumping right back in, not long after Chen Zhao had joined Hameen's Verendi, we go back to Hellfire Bay in Krakoa to where the Hellfire Trading Company, they're discussing big profits as well as small issues that need to be resolved. And at this time, showing up fashionably late, you have the White Bishop, Christian Frost, the brother of Emma Frost. And for those who don't know, as far as his mutant powers, he has the ability to manipulate energy and either create constructs or blast with that energy. But the reason he's late I want to get into real quick, because prior to this point he was in the Arctic with Iceman, who had to make his way there to put out some fires, which Bobby had very much expressed these fires as a result of the human race being the dominant species for so long, which of course caused him to put the word Anthropocene in everything. But while up there amongst their conversation, I do want to point out or highlight Bobby's concern for Kate Pryde, who's still not able to walk through Krakoan doors, which puts this worry in the back of his mind, like if she can't walk through the doors, then can she be resurrected by the Five? And with Bobby saying this, Christian mentions that he's noticed that there's been like this obvious behavior ever since it was discovered that Kate Pryde couldn't walk through the doors, shortly after everyone was super careful with her. And with doing so mainly because there was this nervous thought of the worst happening if she's fatally injured and the Five can't bring her back. But within this meeting, Sebastian Shaw mentions that his son needs to go to the Horn of Africa, and with doing this he requests that Kate takes the Marauder and just runs this safe little decoy Madripoor mission in the opposite direction, and emphasis on Madripoor, which we'll come back to. But on the surface it really just feels like she's being babied and given the easy stuff again, so she calls for a vote for the Blackstone to figure it out themselves, and it's here where Kate and Emma make it so that Blackstone has to deliver somehow, some way. And this move was very much like throwing an Uno reverse card in the middle of the meeting, causing Shaw to storm off, which I'm sure Kate and Emma enjoyed in that moment. But right after this, when Emma and Kate get a moment alone and they have a few drinks, and when Emma raises her glass and says Slaint in Krakoan, and Slain is like an Irish cheers more or less, but it's here where Kate admits that she doesn't speak fluent Krakoan, and Emma helps her out, possibly giving her like the full translation, because all of a sudden Emma's like here and Kate's like gracias, but also in Krakoan. But it's also with this conversation and possibly the drinks too, but it's here where Kate admits about her fear for the resurrection process not working for her, because as far as learning Krakoan, had she passed through one of the doors once, the full language would have been downloaded in her mind. But since she never has, and she's never learned the language until now, she's also had these haunting thoughts like what if she dies and the Five can't resurrect her, or on the other hand, what if she's the only mutant that grows old on Krakoa, which just kind of shows you that she's thought about it a lot. And what actually surprised me is like when she mentioned to Emma that she also thought about what would life be like had she joined the Massachusetts Academy rather than joining Charles, Storm, and the X-Men. And I mean, I get it, Kate's spending more time with Emma and they've grown much closer lately, but still, the statement kind of had me with a raised eyebrow. But not long after this, when they join everyone else downstairs, Pyro rushes in, he tells them there's huge trouble at Madripoor Bay, which is where Sebastian Shaw was trying to send Kate in the first place. And when they get this alert, the Marauder ends up going there anyway. And as Kate and the others board the Marauder, Shaw also steps through a Krakoan gate that is marked Madripoor. But right after this, when we jump over to Madripoor, which last time I checked, it was mutant friendly. X-Men Blue had their headquarters here at one point, and I mean they got their history with the Hand, but more recently the community has been mutant friendly. But fast forward to now when the Marauders arrive, Storm and Bishop going first, only to discover that Verendi, which likely is short for Hameen's Verendi, but they discovered that Verendi has put a large bounty on Shinobi's boat, which ironically is called the Upstart. Which if you guys remember on the first Marauders video on the playlist, when I talked about a bit of Shinobi's history, that was the same name of the team that he joined when he aligned himself with Game Master and plotted to kill his father Sebastian Shaw. So with that said, it's like how much of these memories are really coming back to Shinobi? And like where does he think he got that name from? Because it's a bit too much of a coincidence. But when Bishop and Storm arrive here, they're met with more soldiers with the power dampening suits like Bobby had seen in Russia. And when these dudes tell them like go ahead and surrender because you're powerless, It's here where the old Aurora comes back, because you don't corner a claustrophobic ex-thief, ex-gang member from the streets of Cairo, of which she was a legit gang member by the age of 5 or 6, and that was like after crawling out of a plane crash as the sole survivor. And not just that, but also leader of the Morlocks at one point. So when this dude calls her powerless, like he quickly wishes that he was struck by lightning. But then again, struck by lightning, stabbed in the eye. I don't know. I can't call it. But regardless of the fact, her and Bishop have a lot on their hands here. And not to mention, before I forget to say this, but that knife is also a vibranium knife which was given to her by T'Challa, to whom recently just came back to Earth, but more about them reuniting recently in the Black Panther playlist, down in the description. But jumping over to Kate and the others, it's here where the Marauders are nearly hit by another ship which is armed and heading at them intentionally, but with Kate pulling the clutch move and phasing the boat between the other boat, which would have been even more clutch had the second boat not stopped. And then off of the boat comes X-cutioner and Hatemonger, who jump aboard screaming Homines Verendi, which not only confirms their association with the return of the new Inner Circle, but with X-cutioner being here, it concerns me a little bit. And you're probably wondering why I'm not too concerned about Hatemonger, and that's mainly just because he's an Omega level hater. And twofold, he's lucky that Storm wasn't here, and not mainly because he's a Black Panther villain, or I would consider him more of a Black Panther villain, but also one-on-one Hatemonger versus Storm. Even with just the vibranium dagger, I'm putting my money on Storm. Absolutely. But before I get into X-cutioner, who knocked Bobby clean out, Kate was able to save him quickly by phasing him through the deck just in time. And when she goes to do the same for Pyro, to where with doing so, she takes Hatemonger's sword and stabs him in the back with it, X-cutioner then attempts to stab her with his sword, only to fail with it phasing through her. But real quick, just to mention why I had a concern with X-cutioner, Carl Denti. It's mainly because back when he was an FBI agent, he worked close with Fred Duncan, to whom prior to Fred's death, he worked close with Charles, sharing with Charles confidential FBI information, which later led Charles to find Cyclops, and prior to that he helped Wolverine, but after Fred died, Carl Denti inherited all of Fred's research, which included technology that Charles would use as well, which helped him in a huge way going forward as the X-cutioner, and that concerns me a little bit. But when he goes to stab Kate here, it actually goes through her and it hits Pyro. And when he does, we find out that by way of this sword, Yellowjacket has made his way into Pyro's bloodstream in a super tiny submarine, which just goes to show you how orchestrated this was, because it's here where we see Homines Verendi, who are watching this all go down, but now also with the assistance of Yellowjacket, who they mention is also going to be their eyes and ears, with him now running surveillance through Pyro. But at this point, with Bishop and Storm, who were able to get all the children off of the Upstart and onto the Marauder, which was kind of the plan so that the Upstart could keep going to the Horn of Africa, and the Marauders would take the children back to Krakoa. And Kate also being able to get the ships to separate, this then allowed her to leave X-cutioner and Hatemonger to Bishop and Storm, who also got their powers back, by the way. But also with the two ships now separated, Kate also jumps over to their ship in order to peek inside and see what they have going on, which essentially was a full inventory of those mutant power dampening suits. But also on board, she runs into Zen Chow and Donald Pierce, which makes it feel like all the haters are having a tea party. And so Chen Zhao we talked about recently, but Donald Pierce I don't think we've talked about in a minute. But long story short, he's the former White Bishop of the previous Hellfire Club, he's former leader of the Reavers, and for anyone who's completely new, he's this dude from the Logan movie. And for whatever reason after doing that, I feel like there's going to be a few people who are going to be like, oh. But also with Donald Pierce being the ambassador between Madripoor and the United States, to where he represents Madripoor, this just pulls back a whole nother level of how deep Homines Verendi has made connections rallying towards their cause. But not after long, Kate takes down Pierce, and after that she punches Zhao for good measure, because that's how Marauders get down. But as far as the lingering issue of Hatemonger and X-cutioner, this is resolved by who better than Bishop, who literally just gives them a taste of what they've been dishing out. And from there, hopefully X-cutioner can execute treading water. But I'm not gonna front like Storm didn't jump in like, let me get a piece of that action, cause she pretty much does the same with Donald Pierce when she hits him with the Fire God Liu Kang lightning kit, also knocking him off the boat into the water, where he was probably like, so this is how Kronika feels. Which was a nice way to finish this whole boat scuffle, might I mention. But at this point, after using the Krakoan gate to get Shinobi Shaw and the refugees back to Krakoa quickly and safely, But it's like now they gotta figure out what they're gonna do with this extra boat and the suits on board, which are designed to depower mutants. And they know they want to get Beast and Forge to take a look at it, but it would simply just be too dangerous to just take all of this equipment over to Krakoa, with the threat of it being like a Trojan horse type of setup. But at the same time, who better than Forge to take a look at this, since some time back mutant dampeners were his invention. But so to execute this in a way that doesn't compromise the safety of the people of Krakoa, Kate tells Storm and the others that she'll meet them on Island M, and with doing so just have Forge and Beast examine the equipment there. But I also gotta say, with getting a closer look at these suits, which are Mark 2.1 variants of the ones that we've seen in Russia, and I can't help but notice how similar they are to the Tony Stark design. And of course, this wouldn't be the first time recently that someone has gotten their hands on Tony's research, but it's almost uncanny the way they draw resemblance to Tony's suits. And we definitely gotta talk about Tony a little bit more in a minute. But while Kate is here, and it's just her and Lockheed making their way to Island M, but it's here where she's met with the arrival of Sebastian Shaw, who quickly constrains Lockheed by shooting a net over him and leaving all this just between himself and Kate Pryde. And I'm telling you, like, this is one of them scenes where like you cue the music in the background from like the betrayal of Alex Murphy. Because when Kate threatens Shaw of like locking him up next to Sabretooth, he pretty much just responds like, not today. And from the miniature golf course that they're standing on, Shaw uses some Krakoan gel seeds to constrain Kate so she can't move. But with doing this, Shaw goes super savage mode. And as we come to find out, like, this is all something he's had planned for a good minute. Because with constraining Kate here, he kicks her sword out of her hand so she can't cut herself out. And he takes Lockheed, who's constrained within this net, and throws him into the ocean. And I'm telling you, like, when he did this, like, every picture of Shadowcat and Lockheed that I've ever seen like flashed before my eyes in an instant. Because there was a point in time when you never did not see them two together. And with Shaw just throwing Lockheed overboard, that hurt. And so he very much makes it seem like he's doing this because he wants her seat on the council, which I do believe is his genuine motive. But when Kate hears this, she's like, take the seat, save Lockheed. Because when you compare the two, it's a no-brainer. Like, it ain't that deep. And I mean, that's probably a bad choice of words given the situation. But in the case of Shaw, as far as motive goes, I do truly believe that he wants her seat. Because with Kate out the picture, he can then put Shinobi in her place, and if Shinobi takes that spot, then it's likely that Emma Frost will be voted out pretty soon after, and possibly replaced by her own brother, Christian Frost, who we haven't seen yet vote in Emma's favor. But it's also here where we discovered that Shaw bribed Donald Pierce and set up this whole trap, while also leveraging information out of Christian Frost, who wants his love interest Bobby Drake to leave the Marauders and join with him. And Shaw told Kate like her pride made this easy to do, and likely pun intended, but he tells her pride lined all of this up, with her constantly telling the others that they don't have to watch over her so closely, she can handle things herself, which ultimately led her blind to this attack. And when Shaw blows the charges, sinking her ship, causing her to go down with it, this is where so many thoughts start racing through my mind. And first, to start off, just to make it clear, I truly believe that Shaw did this because he wanted Kate out of the way and he wanted her seat on the Quiet Council for the reasons that we had just discussed. But in the back of my mind, I just have these thoughts of like, what if Charles was involved to some extent? Because if you guys remember before, when Emma Frost was approached by Charles for her help in influencing the votes, which in exchange got her 2 seats at the Quiet Council, but when this was done, Xavier and Magneto made it mandatory that the 3rd seat would go to Sebastian Shaw, who at the time it was obvious that they wanted him on the council for a reason, and it may have been just his connections through the Hellfire Club to use his businesses and distribute Krakoan pharmaceuticals. But what if there was more to it? Because what if Charles wanted Sebastian Shaw there just to be Sebastian Shaw, and with doing that use him as one of many placeholders to handle a particular someone who Charles had discovered through Sinister after Charles had entered Sinister's mind, telling him to collect every mutant blood sample. And with the way that Marauders has been playing out, like, this is something that takes my thoughts back over to the hunt for Wolverine. Because if you guys remember back at the time when we were talking about Adamantium agenda as part of the hunt for Wolverine, where at the time we had got a number of flashbacks that had dove into the history between Logan and Tony Stark, which ultimately had led Tony to what at the time was likely Sinister's main base, where Sinister had kept the DNA sample of every mutant and every human, and it kind of gave us this moment to where Tony hesitated to look into this information before destroying the place, and as we know, he looked anyway. But with doing so, he discovered a number of things, like Laura Kinney being more like Logan than she believed, and Sarah Kinney being her legit biological mother, which we then got a bit deeper into with Orphans of X. But the real kicker at the time. It was more so when we discovered that Tony, after seeing Sinister's files, he had discovered that one of the X-Men wasn't actually a mutant, but rather they were genetically altered to appear as a mutant and likely for the purpose of being a sleeper agent. Which then takes me back to Kate Pryde, who hasn't been able to walk through the Krakoan doors from day one, and it makes you wonder, like, was her blood sample not among Sinister's mutant blood samples? Because if they weren't, then this would explain a lot, with Sinister not categorizing her as a mutant, and if someone altered her DNA to appear as a mutant, this would have had to been done long ago, and I mean likely before the members of Hermes Versace were born. But if all of this is certainly the case, and Charles was able to pick this up through Mr. Sinister, and in response used Shaw to eliminate this threat, then it's like, man, like how far was Xavier talking about going in the conversation of breaking the rules this time around? Because if you think about it, what he started with Moira and Magneto, this happened way back. Moira was like 17, and if that were to make like the full history of Kate Pryde, Kitty Pryde, Shadowcat, all of that, like this Sinister Madeline Pryor type situation to where he cloned her as well, or even altered her DNA, then you could kind of see Charles looking at Kate as a threat rather than the Kitty we've known for so long, which is something that Kate will be fully unaware of, at least until this questionable sleeper agent thing is activated. But that's just one of those things that we'll have to wait and see how it pans out. But as far as within the recent Wolverine run written by Benjamin Percy, it really feels like it's over there where we're gonna start to get some of these answers, which will likely come about by way of the Pale Girl, who's been using mind control on the mutants of Krakoa lately. And I'm telling you, man, like it's getting wild right now, and just about everyone has some type of dirt on their hands. But real quick, I want to give a shout out to all the Patreons. Thank you guys for all of your support, and for anyone who's new here who wants more information on how to support the channel, I got a link below to where you can head over to patreon.com/DopeSpill for more information. But that'll do it for this one, guys. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below, because Marauders has been getting better and better, and I can't wait for these issues to start spilling back out again. But let me know your thoughts down in the comments. Stay safe, and we'll do it again in the next one. Alright, later.